Good evening. It is Monday, February 1st. This is the Guilford, Connecticut Board of Education. Tonight we are holding a special meeting to discuss the proposed school budget for the academic year 2021-2022 that has been brought to the board by Dr. Freeman and the Guilford Public Schools Administration. You will note on the agenda that this meeting is set up to act on this budget. I want to be clear that the board actually has until next Monday to act on this budget. And I actually fully expect that tonight will be a really helpful and substantive conversation, but that the board will be holding on a budget vote until next Monday, simply because we expect to discuss a number of things that we may want to continue to think about and deliberate about until we take this important vote. I do want to acknowledge that we have a number of our district leadership team with us tonight, and I want to thank them for joining us. We really appreciate your participation in this discussion. I also just want to note for the viewing public that most of you are well aware that we are holding this meeting while there is a snowstorm happening outside our windows. We fully expect that we will be able to complete this meeting this evening. However, if I note that a number of our key participants are dropping off because they have lost internet connection and or power, or if you notice that the meeting itself disappears, likely for that same reason, please note that we will need to reschedule. So I just want to make the public aware of that. The board held 2 public forums last Monday and Tuesday evening and heard from many people, community members with input on this budget, and we thoroughly appreciate their participation. Likewise, we have received a number of emails also commenting on this budget. I will note that we've received a number of emails asking questions about or expressing some concerns about one position or one full-time equivalent position in the music department. We have heard some support for the equity liaison and the residency position. We have heard at least one email with some concerns about the 1.0 reduction in the math position. We have heard support for the swim team and some requests for potentially additional funding. And we've heard support for the addition of 2 art teachers at the elementary level. Some folks understanding that that will come with some reduction in world language time, other people expressing some concerns. So we've heard a whole host of subjects, and any of those are certainly on the table for discussion tonight. I will note that probably we've heard the most about the music position. And so that will certainly be an important topic this evening, and maybe where we can start. I will note for the public, and I speak with confidence on behalf of the rest of the Board of Education, that we are well aware of the wonderful music program that we have. We are in full support of the quality of this music program, and we are in full recognition of what a music program can offer students. That is actually not the question this evening. The question is, I think, that has been raised at least, is does this 1 point full-time equivalent reduction impact that quality at all? I think we are well aware that Guilford Public Schools has been watching an enrollment reduction in our student body that started about 7.5 years ago. I kind of thinking of it as kind of marching through the grades. It hit Adams this year. So some of you may remember that last year, one of the budget items was the reduction of a number of English language teachers at Adams. This year, we are considering, again, not only a music teacher, but a math position for that reason. And we fully expect this to hit Guilford High School in the following year. We are seeing there's literally a break in one class to another of about 50 students. So our classes at the high school, grades at the high school are anywhere from 275 students. We have one that's, I think, 300 students. At the middle school level, we're now seeing 221, 225. And I would tell you this year we have a first grade with 195. So it's an issue we're going to have to continue to consider. So I'm going to stop talking for the moment and turn to Dr. Freeman for opening comments, if you would, if you have any, and if you would. And then I think we would love to hear your thoughts, given what we heard in the public forum about concerns about the music program, and hear from any of the other participants in this meeting who have information to offer.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci. For opening comments, I think I just want to reiterate comments that I made when I shared this budget with you, the Board of Education, and comments that I made when we had our first meeting, well, second meeting with the Board of Finance. You know, we're going through a national medical emergency. That medical emergency has spawned both a financial crisis in our country and locally in Guilford, and an educational crisis. This budget attempts to respond to both of those crises. It does not ignore either one and address only the other. You know, this budget is one of the most conservative budget. It is the most conservative budget that has ever moved from the administrative team to the Board of Education. We have had other budgets in my time in Guilford that have ended lower than this. We've never had one that has started this low. That is in response to the financial realities that we recognize. We fully anticipate that Guilford Public Schools will be realizing reduced resources from the state as the state begins to respond to the impacts of this financial crisis. We fully realize that there are community members and families in this community who have been impacted financially by this crisis, have lost jobs, have had hours reduced, have picked up additional expenses due to childcare, and that if there has ever been a year to work in keeping the overall town budget and therefore the overall impact on taxpayers low, that this was a year for us, the schools, part of the community, to recognize and be responsive to that. On the other hand, this budget does not sacrifice programming or students or our support of students in that effort. This budget comes in at this moment, it sits at a 1.49% increase. That we believe is the middle ground. If we were ignoring the financial crisis and only looking to support our children, we could have brought a 3 or 5% increasing budget if we were ignoring the financial impact of this and only thinking about how to support our kids in every way coming out of this crisis. On the other hand, and I have been asked, why isn't this budget coming in at zero? If we were only responding to the financial crisis and not paying attention to our responsibility to our students and our programs and ensuring that we bring our students forward through this crisis and out of this crisis, to bring a 0% increase in this budget would not be responsible to those responsibilities. We firmly believe that this budget that we bring forward finds that middle ground. It protects programming It ensures that we will be able to support our children moving forward through this crisis, and it is responsive to the financial needs of the community. Dr. Balistraci, you talked about the enrollment declines. The enrollment declines are a reality. The district has been experiencing enrollment declines since 2000 and 2001. Guilford has been insulated from some of those enrollment declines compared to other similar communities. There are communities all across the state that have been closing schools as a result of those enrollment declines. At Guilford, we've never considered the impact or the need to close one of our schools in response to these declines. We have, however, over the last several years, been responding to those declines. We have been, more years than not, reducing elementary classroom positions as those declines have first moved through the elementary schools. We have not been increasing elementary class sizes. The elementary class sizes in Guilford have continued to float around right around 18, which is an incredibly positive class size, as we have been reducing those teaching positions in parallel to the reducing decline in enrollment. As you noted, in the last few years, those declines have been moving up through the elementaries and into our middle grades. Since school year 2009-10, Adams has declining enrollment of 160 students over that time frame. That's 35% of the population at Adams that has declined over that time frame. In that same time frame, we have reduced a world language position at Adams. We have reduced a partial PE position at Adams. Last year, as you mentioned, we reduced 6 English language arts positions at Adams. This budget includes the recommended reduction of both a math position and a music position at Adams. None of these positions are programmatic reductions. Just as we have paralleled the enrollment adjustments at the elementary school so that class sizes haven't been impacted, these reductions are paralleling the reduced number of students in the building. There are 2 kinds of reductions. There are enrollment deductions, and then there are programmatic eliminations, reductions. I want to be really, really clear. This adjustment at Adams, both in math and in music this year, is not a programmatic reduction. In no way will this staffing adjustment affect the courses or the options that we offer to our students in either of those areas. We will continue to offer all of the math options that we have offered in the past. We will continue to offer all of the music's offerings that we've offered in the past, including general music, which only came back into the Adams catalog of offerings this year. In this pandemic year, we began bringing general music back. It had been gone from the Adams offerings, again, since about 2009, 2010, when Adams was responding to really increased enrollment. We will continue to offer chorus and orchestra and band to the students at Adams. I have been really appreciative of the communications that we've received through this budget cycle, and particularly so around the communications that we've received around music. The passion and the enthusiasm and the support for the music program is really, really uplifting. It is exciting to see and hear, but I can't say clearly enough, I agree with everything that I've read in all of those communications. It is important that we protect the quality of the music programming in Guilford Public Schools. This reduction does not threaten that opportunity, that programming, or I believe the quality of that programming. Again, we're going to continue to offer all of the options that we have offered, which was one of the concerns that I read and heard in many of the communications. I also want to be really clear. While music instruction at the state of Connecticut is a K through 12 generalist certification, we have efforted in Guilford to always recognize that within music certification, individual teachers develop certain areas of specialty, or they bring certain strengths themselves to those opportunities. We have always efforted in Guilford to make sure that we place people with students where they share a passion and where they share a strength around a certain musical endeavor, vocal versus strings or strings versus band. We will continue to do that. In one of our conversations, I think last Tuesday, I mentioned that one of the opportunities to make sure that we do that is to remember that we've got more buildings than just Adams. We're not just programming for Adams. We have the ability when we schedule to reach up into the high school or down into Baldwin if necessary. And the music programming currently at Adams has done exactly that, with one position that is shared between both the high school and Adams. I can assure you that when we finalize staffing for these positions and when we schedule staffing for these positions, Mr. Regan at Adams is going to work collaboratively with Mrs. Chaff at the high school and with Mr. Hamill at Baldwin to make sure that we get teachers into those positions. Last week, the example I gave was that 2.4 teaching positions at Adams could easily be a 0.8 band teacher who also teaches a band class somewhere else, and a 0.8 orchestra teacher who also teaches an orchestra class in one of our other schools, and likewise for the choral position. There were comments on the heels of that illustration that traveling is not efficient, that the teachers would lose time in travel between buildings. That's true. My illustration could have easily been that we will have a 0.8 position teaching chorus and teaching one class at Adams of general music, a 0.8 position teaching band and picks up one class of general music. We've got multiple opportunities to make sure that we schedule folks into those positions. One of the other concerns that I read was, and I appreciate this, and it was a concern for the actual teachers, for the real people who are part of our team here in Guilford and people who have committed a good chunk, if not all, of their careers to teaching the children of Guilford Public Schools. I appreciate that concern. There is nothing more difficult for us to do as a leadership team than to make difficult decisions around enrollment and around the number of positions that are necessary to meet the needs of those enrolled students. But I believe that that is my responsibility as leader of the school district, and it is our responsibility as a leadership team to make those difficult decisions and make those difficult recommendations. That said, once that decision gets made as part of a budget process, we then look at scheduling and look at staffing and do it in a way that can be as supportive of our people within that first decision as possible. And I need to say that every year in the Guilford Public Schools, we see turnover of between 25 and 35, on average, between 25 and 35 positions in the Guilford Public Schools. There are 12 different positions assigned across music, K through 12. It is too early in this process for people to begin speculating over who will or may not move. It is not unusual for within a K through 12 department, whether that is special education or music or PE or any of a number of certifications that are K through 12, for us to see retirements or relocations or resignations. I'm looking at Mr. Buno in this meeting tonight. None of us anticipated 2 years ago that Mr. Buno was going to leave our music classroom to pursue an opportunity in administration. It is simply too soon to start making those decisions. It's not too soon for me to tell the community that we take those decisions very, very carefully and thoughtfully. Last year at Adams, we reduced 6 full-time English language arts positions. Those were 6 people who have worked in this school district, some of them for a significant amount of time. The entire English language department at Adams was 12 people. We reduced it by half last year because we restructured the schedule and we were responding to the enrollment concerns. Mr. Regan and the Teachers Association and Mr. Bowden out of his HR office and I worked very, very carefully to honor every one of those moves and decisions and make sure that we were supporting the people who fill our positions. And I can assure this community that when we make this move, should we choose to make this move moving forward, we will apply exactly that level of care and concern as we make those decisions and those assignments moving forward, both to protect the specialist scheduling that many of the commenters spoke to this week, and to honor the people that are going to be impacted if that decision is taken moving forward. Another comment that I heard a lot of this past week, and again, that I really, really appreciate, and I just want to name moving forward, is that we're talking about making this decision in the midst of the pandemic, and that this is a really difficult time to make a decision like this, and that music instruction has been impacted by the reality of this pandemic. Again, I agree with every individual who brought that comment forward. The only thing that I want to do is to just name that pandemic impact has been, it's hit every single element of our school system. This entire budget has been built in light of the impact that pandemic has had. This budget has increased social and emotional and mental health position in it. This budget is in response to that. And again, one of the reasons that this budget is as conservative as it is this early in the process is because of the pandemic itself. All I can say is we know and we agree with you. And as we make these decisions and as we continue to move through this pandemic, we will continue to try to do so thoughtfully and carefully and with all of the care that we can bring to the decisions that we make. When we brought this recommendation forward to the Board of Education, we did so knowing that it was going to be an emotional recommendation. We did so knowing that this town takes an enormous amount of pride in this music program that we offer to our students and that we present to our community. This recommendation does not sacrifice or compromise that pride. And I honestly believe that our teachers in music and math this year, as in English language arts and in PE and in world language in past years, will rise to this and will meet the needs of the students moving forward. Again, I want to go back to that number I gave from 2009. We mentioned that one of the reasons we are confident that we will be able to continue to develop teacher relationships with students, to offer time, individual time, teacher to student, was because that the projected class changes that we see from this change, classes that this year sit at around 10, next year will sit at around 13 if we make this change. In 2009-10, when there were 160 more students walking the halls of Adams, when the student population was 35% larger than it is today, those were the class sizes that we were seating in music classes. In fact, they might have been a little bit larger then. And many of the students who moved through the music program in Adams circa 2009-10 are in fact voices that we heard this last week, or we heard parents of those students. Current students who are sitting in college studying music, or students who are in the early stages of a professional musical career, came through the Adams music program when classes were at that level. And look at the success that they're reaping now. I guess my bottom line is just to say that we would not have brought this recommendation forward to you if we thought that it compromised or sacrificed the quality of this program. And I just want the board and the community to have that said one more time as we now ask you to make some really difficult decisions, not just around music, but around a full budget that you are considering and weighing as you move forward. And again, I want to point out that we do have Mr. Regan who is here tonight, we have Mr. Buno here tonight, and we have Mr. Hamill here tonight. I will note, again, sort of district-wide, two pieces about music that I think are important to this conversation. 4 years ago, we reduced not a full FTE, but we reduced a half of an FTE at Baldwin in the music program. And I believe that the Baldwin music program continues to be exceptional. 2 years ago, we increased the elementary music programming by 2 full-time positions. We went from 2 elementary positions to 4 elementary positions. We have in fact bolstered the earliest years of music education just in the last 2-year window, even in the face of those declining enrollments that I have been mentioning. And even should the board choose to take this recommendation and make a reduction of 1, the overall district-wide music staffing will still be 1 position higher when we open the doors next year than it was 2 years ago, than it was 2 years ago before we made those additions to the elementary grades. And with that, I think I've probably talked enough, but I know that there's going to be a lot of questions and conversation from board members.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freeman. So I do want to welcome the board to discuss or ask questions. I'm quite sure board members do have some follow-up questions given the amount of feedback we've heard from the community and also from their own study of the budget book and all the considerations before us. Go ahead, Ms. Sullivan.
Dr. Freeman, since you finished on music, I'll quickly ask a question. I understand everything you're mentioning about contact time and not having programmatic changes. Some of the emails that we have received mention some of the stuff that happens out of the specific school day. So, things that happen before school, after school, honor band, certain orchestra groups, and different things like that. Is that included in things that wouldn't change and programmatically?
Yes, and thank you for asking the question. I failed to mention that. Many of those other opportunities are exactly the kinds of things that have been curtailed this year as a result of the pandemic. Those remain in the budget. There continue to be stipended positions for the music staff to provide all of those opportunities. Yes, we have not removed any music related stipends from this budget at any of the levels. They're not extracurricular in music, they may be considered co-curricular. All of those extra opportunities will continue to be in the budget moving forward, and we will begin offering those again as soon as guidance tells us that it is safe to do so.
I'm on mute, sorry. Other questions from board members? Go ahead, Dr. Hirsch.
So, Dr. Freeman, this was very helpful. One can't help but be impressed on the 2 nights that we heard from the community, not only in terms of how passionate and how eloquent every speaker was, aside from the numbers. There are very few communities, I think, that could have a meeting like that and find such an enlightened group of people on any issue, much less one that's so emotionally fraught. And my understanding of the collective concern of most of what we got was, we understand the enrollment question. If it's an algorithmic issue, that's understandable, but music is different. It's not English, it's not math. The specialty of the teacher and the individual attention the teacher can give is really the nature of the music business. And that's a pretty powerful and persuasive argument to me. Same thing can be said in some case with language as well. And I hear you saying tonight that in your response that, one, you hear that clearly, it's legitimate, it's one of the issues that you've thought about, and that you're able to say the students will not suffer at all in the ways in which parents are worried, simply because we've gotten rid of 1 position. There are ways in which the system can accommodate that with appropriate expertise. So I want to make sure I do your position justice, at the same time make sure that we do all the voices that we heard, because if I'm accurate on both, it seems to me we have some sort of an overlap. There seems to be some sort of agreement. So have I overstated that in either case?
No, in fact, you said it a lot more clearly and succinctly than I did. Going through those 2 evenings last week, I've never walked away from a conversation feeling so good after so many people disagreed with me. The fact is, I walked away not feeling that there was a lot of disagreement. Again, I agreed with all of the positions that those individuals had made. It is just that from the budgetary and you're right, algorithmic standpoint, over these last 10 years, as the student enrollment has slowly declined, we have built capacity, and we can now make the adjustment and continue. Now, what I will say in defense of our teachers is that Guilford teachers do not sit around and read magazines. So when a Guilford teacher, music or otherwise, finds that they have some capacity in their schedule, they give that to students. And so we've not wasted time. We haven't provided no-show jobs, but we can make this adjustment and continue to offer the quality of program that we pride ourselves on. Now, again, we may need to compare that to school year 9-10, not last year, because that capacity is going to be looked at differently. And I understand the response that we have heard, but again, I will hold up the change that was made in English language arts. And right, we made that change last school year, and the English department opened at Adams this August, this September, into the teeth of the pandemic, and have done exceptional work with the students. I will hold up the change made at Baldwin. I mean, during these last weeks, we've heard people come out and talk about the quality of that program at Baldwin. And so again, you said it better than I could, Dr. Hirsch. We can make the change. We agree with the concerns that were raised. We share the values that were shared. And I wouldn't be making this recommendation, or let me rephrase that. There have been times in my career where districts were needing to make draconian budget cuts. And there have been times where I have had to recommend cuts and label them as programmatic reductions. This is moving backwards, and this is something that our students will lose. There are other cuts that are, again, enrollment driven, efficiencies in nature, and they help the districts to then creatively respond to any number of other pressures, whether those be fiscal and financial at the town level, or other needs in the district that we need to be able to be addressing that aren't addressed right now. So no, I don't disagree with the way that you summarized that position.
Moira, go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Freeman, thank you for that very helpful reinforcement of the intentions behind the reduction. I think coming as both a board member and a parent of several students in the district at different levels, I think it's one of the things I think parents were concerned about. I think at first we heard the focus on Adams, but overall the more concern for the music program of Guilford, from the very youngest age up. And I think it's important to hopefully reinforce that we're not only going to be assuring them of the Adams program, but that we're assuring them of the district-wide progressive music program, and that this isn't a pull away from an arts program in our district, that we very much stand behind that and intend to only strengthen it and reinforce it, especially coming back next year. Because I know we heard a lot from parents about Baldwin students, right? That I have one of them that's really hasn't had music and a cogent music program in a year and a half, to nobody's fault but the pandemic. So if you could just speak to that again. I know you said it, but I think it's important that although we're focused on it being an Adams position, that we reinforce that nothing is going to change in terms of the offerings, and that it's not, I said this to in one of the meetings, we know our kids will always have math. We know our kids will always have science. Those are academic requirements that the district will never do away with, but the arts is always that thing that parents get nervous about, that if something has to go, it might be that. So if you could just speak to that a little bit, even on the younger grades, that would be really helpful.
I do, and again, I really appreciate the question. I think it's important to note, we are making a reduction of one position in the music program district-wide. we did that as thoughtfully and carefully and responsibly as we could. I think the fact that we aren't removing one or two of the positions that most recently went into the elementary level actually illustrates our commitment to that K through 12, pre-K through 12 commitment to the arts that you're talking about. You know, oftentimes the first thing to come out of a budget is the last thing that went in, and that is often not the most informed way to make those decisions. I think that the conversation and the inclusion in this budget of an increase of visual arts at the elementary level is also, right, evidence of that commitment moving forward. Now, that investment has a cost on the time that we can provide for world language, but we've talked about a way to try to make up that contact time by looking at vertical alignment 5 through 12 in that area. Schedules and budgets are always, right, dollars are not unlimited and time is not unlimited, and so it's always this push and pull. But I appreciate the question. This in no way is a suggestion that we are walking away from our commitment to the arts writ large. We can, again, the music department, even if this decision is taken, the music department is still going to be one above where it was in school year 18-19, even though the overall district enrollment is 400 students down not in that time frame. I apologize. It's 400 over a much longer period. But even though enrollment is declining, the music department K through 12 is still up in the face of declining enrollment. We are not walking away from our commitment to the arts with this decision. Again, this is an enrollment adjustment. It is in no way a programmatic decision. And I understand how some people will say, how can it be anything but? Fewer people will reduce the I absolutely understand that argument. I don't necessarily disagree with that argument. I just want to help everybody understand how we came to that decision. If this were a budget that included a 3% increase, all of us would like to have more teachers, and I could make an argument for more PE teachers, more math teachers, more music, more, but that's not the way that public schools budget, fund, or staff their buildings. And so I appreciate the question. It is a difficult financial decision. It is not a step away from our commitment to the arts programming in this school system.
Thank you.
Dr. Freeman, if I may just take Mrs. Rader's comment one step further, right? So I think what I hear you saying, but I'm going to ask you to be a little more explicit about it, right? We know that kids are coming back in September, whether they're music students or whether we're talking about English or math or any host of subjects coming back having missed something over the last year plus. We know specifically that that Baldwin fifth graders weren't able to pick up an instrument, right? So we know that there's concern as we talk about an Adams reduction in 1 point FT, a full-time equivalent, that there are concerns, right? That the Baldwin music program may need some support in kind of helping students in that way. And I just want to clarify that what I'm hearing is that there is a full recognition of that as well. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I apologize, I was muted. Absolutely. Our administrative team, our teachers in the classrooms, we all recognize that students have been impacted by this pandemic in a myriad of ways. It's going to impact reading development, it's going to impact math development, it's going to impact music development. We absolutely recognize that. And we intend to support all of those subject areas across, right? And again, we've got the capacity when a department or a certification area is 7 through 12 to be able to look across the buildings and make sure that we have those supports in place. We have experts within the leadership team, right? Again, Mr. Buno has come back to us as a member of our leadership team now. He left as one of the music teachers that we've been talking about. The team is the team, but Mr. Buno, his contributions were not small to that team or the quality of that program. He left us for a short time to become a K through 12 music coordinator, where he was responsible for music instruction in a much larger school district than ours. He's back now, and while his primary responsibility is to the high school, we have capacity to support our teachers across 13 grades and across all of the subject area that we offer. Music will not be left out of that equation. And this adjustment doesn't mean that we take the impact of this pandemic any less seriously there. We will make sure that the opportunity for 6th graders next year, whose 5th grade was impacted, is going to be appropriate for them to move forward. We will make sure, Mr. Hamill, I can assure you, will make sure that those students get the scheduling and the support that they need to be effective in that program. And if we need to reach district-wide for other support or other advice or other resources, then we make those adjustments. But again, I can't say enough. Every area has been impacted by this pandemic, and we are supporting all of them as we come back into the school next year. Hopefully sooner than next year. Hopefully we may be able to see schedules begin to migrate back to more normal before next year. But we're going to have work to do, and it's a conversation that is permeating the district right now. We're, again, I guess, to Dr. Hirsch's comment about the comments that we've been hearing this past week, we're aware of that. We recognize that. And we are going to be committing our whole selves to making sure that we do that work. I'm not going to say that we've got it. I'm not going to say that we've got it figured out and it's going to be easy. It's not. We're going to learn through it and live through it together. But we will absolutely make sure that we are addressing those concerns and supporting those students at Baldwin, both 5th and 6th grade, many of whom for the first time, right, will be brand new beginners in those areas.
Are there other board members who have questions? Go ahead, Amy, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt someone else's term, but something else I was just thinking about is, Dr. Balistraci opened the meeting talking about this known enrollment change that we've been watching for several years as it's marched through elementary, now middle, and is going to go on to the high school. And we knew that, and we look at that and birth rates and all these things. But when we go back, said with optimism, in the fall, maybe in the spring, there still may be families that have for whatever reason make different choices that take their students out of Guilford Public Schools, and also may consider homeschooling or whatever they need to do. And so I think we need to be aware that there could be additional enrollment changes, and we've had that before when we try to sort of guesstimate kindergarten registration and staffing for those classrooms, as we've done in previous budgets.
Yeah, the overall decline that we're projecting for next year is 111 students across the full district. I believe that may end up not being that significant, as we see some of exactly the families that you referenced drifting back in. But again, I want to be really clear that the decision that's being made at Adams is not based on 1 year of enrollment declines or 1 year of projected enrollment declines. And it is something that we have been addressing at Adams over several years. Again, spread over about the last 4 or 5 years have been reductions, again, in world language, PE, English language arts, now math and music. And so you're absolutely right. And again, I can reassure this board and the community that if necessary, we will fill positions even if they are unbudgeted. This board knows that in past years, when kindergarten enrollment has exceeded our projections, we've created additional kindergarten sections so that we're not just pushing more kids into whatever we planned for number of sections, increasing class sizes. This administration knows that we have the support of this board, and if, excuse me, and if we recognize an unmet need, even if it hasn't been budgeted for, we will meet that need and we will figure out a way to cover the the budget implications of that. We've always been successful at that. We've done it this year to a degree never seen before, and we know that we've got the support of both this board and the Board of Finance. There are a number of unbudgeted positions, teaching and otherwise, in this year's, on the ground in our schools this year, because we needed to respond to the realities of the pandemic. And we will cover those expenses, and we know that we have the support, again, of this board and the Board of Finance to do that. A school district can't afford to do that year over year over year, but we have addressed those sorts of enrollment changes, and we'll do so again this year if we see it necessary. See it as necessary.
Dr. Freeman, I wonder, obviously we have many of our district leadership team here, which I greatly appreciate. I'm certainly not going to be the person who calls on anyone, but there may be members of our district leadership team who would like to be part of this discussion. And I just want to acknowledge that and give an opening for folks to do that, because so as we as a board, listen tonight, learn as much as we can, hear from the public. If there are things that that you would like to say on the subject, I want to give you an opening.
I would want to invite Mr. Regan if he wants to. I mean, I know that I have monopolized this conversation to no one's surprise, but we've talked a lot about Adams, and I would want to invite Mr. Regan to be able to speak about his school as well.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. My first thought is that Catherine Walker picked a tremendous time to retire. Her timing was impeccable. She must have saw the wave coming. But thank you. And, I do want to give a shout out to Kevin Buno as well, because if you all remember, Connecticut wanted schools K through 8 to cohort by classroom. And we were considered, obviously we were headed in that direction at Adams, cohorting students in classrooms, yet in the back of my mind thinking, how are we going to keep 8th graders in one room the entire day and trick them to think that it's going to be an exciting school day? So it really was the folks with music, because they were going to suffer the most. The music students would have suffered the most, as Mr. Hamill was experiencing, because you're severely limited when you cohort by classroom, how you can move students throughout the building. So we really sat down and talked with music folks, and Kevin was a big part of that discussion to figure out how can we deliver music safely and have as normal an experience as possible. And one of the things we were able to also do this year was offer general music for all of the students. And that's something new. So we've had a lot of conversations, Mr. Hamill and myself, as well as Julia and Kevin, and looking at Baldwin and the high school to look at our music trajectory. And this process has forced us to really take a look at some of the finer details of the music program. One of the things that we noticed is that we have a drop off in students in chorus when they come to or come through Adams for whatever reason, maybe because kids get to pick, but then we watch those numbers climb back again at the high school. So we talked about what are some of the details that we can put together within our schools that can support kids staying involved in music. So adding general music and being able to look at some of those details of supporting the program from Baldwin and Adams together. But I feel very confident in looking at, because as you well know, a lot of the delivery has to do with how the schedule is set up in a middle school. And so I feel very confident that in the 3 areas of chorus and band and orchestra, students will still have their small group experience as well as to be able to have ensembles, but they will also be able to participate in general music. So like Baldwin, every single student will have music as they did 10 years ago at Adams. So I think that we've been able to put the creative minds of the music department together to look at these options. And so I feel equally as confident that we'll be able to do the same moving forward with looking at those programs. So I certainly just wanted an opportunity to echo that. What we also tried to do this year is to balance out our unified arts selection so that students had different experiences in art. As you know, we added a technology education teacher this year. So now students have a whole nother area where they're exposed to the arts And so music and the unified arts are a more balanced experience for students as opposed to not having to have opportunities in all areas. So that to us was an improvement as well. But again, I go back to the fact that it's not just a one school decision, that we would talk about how do we support all of the students in all of the music programs at Adams.
And
Thank you,
only
Mr.
because
Regan.
only
ahead.
because his name only because his name has been invoked so many times. I do want to invite Mr. Buno. No pressure, but Kevin, if there was something that you wanted to add, debate rules. If somebody invokes your name, you get to respond.
I noticed
I'll
that.
just do one more cutoff, Kevin. I don't know. Many people remember when Tommy Adonolfi left Guilford. Oh my God, what's going to happen to chorus? It's never going to happen. You know, what's going to happen? And then along came Kevin Buno. So there's your intro, Kev.
Oh my, I'm honored. I really am. And Dr. Freeman, thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the board for the time. A lot of great things have been said tonight. I don't have much to contribute to the conversation, except I want to highlight one big point that's been mentioned a few times. And I think it gives me the opportunity to, first of all, celebrate our outstanding community who is quite savvy when it comes to the arts. One of the things I heard over Monday and Tuesday evening, and I was happy I got to listen into both sessions, was that the importance of matching the specialization with a group of students who are studying that specific instrument. In all of the districts that I've worked in, I've seen that a consistent practice. And in the many organizations that I've spoken with, be it the National Association for Music Education, or even the strand associations that go underneath that, our Band Directors Association, our String Directors Association, our Choral Directors Association, they believe wholeheartedly in that practice too, despite the fact that music certification is a generalized certification. I just wanted to thank the community for making sure that that was heard. I also want to thank the Board of Education and Dr. Freeman for affirming that commitment to making sure that students are still supported through that specialization from our outstanding music teachers in this district, with which I had the honor to be a part of. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, even though I'm at the high school level, it was mentioned several times too that this does have a trickle effect. And so I just wanted to emphasize my commitment to that in making sure that as the district has to make these difficult decisions, that I'm certainly happy to roll up my sleeves and help in any way I can. And again, I just want to thank everybody for the valuable commentary. Dr. Hirsch, I think you mentioned it earlier so eloquently. It sounds like there was that harmonious agreement between both the community's outcry for what they were saying, which was so valuable and valid, and for what the district is trying to do. So please note that I commit my support to that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bruno. That was wonderful. Are there others, either district leadership or board members, who have questions, thoughts on this topic? Because there are certainly some other topics to discuss as well, but I don't want to shortchange this one, given the amount of input we've heard. Dr. Hirsch, go ahead.
Well, one last thing. Another thing I was reminded of in all the discussions that we heard from the community was the sort of the developmental, the educational power of music and art. We've heard it before, but it was particularly well articulated in the social-emotional sense. That is, whereas we normally think, or at least America normally thinks of schooling as academic and intellectual, language arts, math, science, self-studies, we hear and have argued that the social emotional education is going to be taken far more explicitly as a focus. In fact, it ought to be a much more pervasive focus in American education. And the arts generally, and music in particular, have been demonstrated by what we've heard, how that impacts kids over time. And the difference existentially it makes in kids' lives at every grade level. And you don't, most of the time, most communities hear that about athletics. We're hearing it as much here about music and art. And I just don't want to lose that over time. Not that we will, but it just resonates with regard to the larger philosophy we've been talking about in the 2 or 3 years I've been part of this. But music, the point that has gotten made is such a powerful whole person educational point that, and it's clearly that we've got a community conscience about that. And it sounds like clearly we've got a faculty and administration and board conscience, and that needs to be celebrated. And I don't want to take it for granted because it feels right.
Wonderful.
I couldn't be prouder of this community or the process that we've been going through these last 2 or 3 weeks. I completely agree.
I will also note, and I don't know, I sincerely hope I state the right statistic, but having had 2 sons go through the music program, one from 5th grade all the way through 12th in numerous ensembles, I remember sitting in, and I believe hearing Mr. Boats mention, I believe, and anyone here can correct me, that we have 55% of kids at the high school who are involved in some way in a music program. And that statistically, that is really different than the general average at many high schools. The quality of the music program in this district is phenomenal. We heard that loud and clear. I have experienced it myself. I have been moved to tears at times sitting in the auditoriums of various schools in this district over the years. We have no intention of harming the quality of this music program. I think you have I'm speaking to the public now, you have a board that feels the importance of it. We certainly heard it, as Dr. Hurst said, much more eloquently than I could from our community. But there are members here who feel it as well. It is a remarkable program. And I will say for myself that the reason this conversation for me is so important, and I understand this proposal as well as I can, is because of the importance of this program, certainly in my life, quite frankly, and in the life of my family, but in the life of this community. So any other thoughts or comments on this topic? That doesn't mean someone can't think of something in 15 minutes, but I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance who has a question or a comment or a thought. I'm scanning Zoom boxes and I'm not seeing any hands. So I do then want to give the board an opportunity to broach any other topic on in Dr. Freeman's budget proposal that they would like to pursue, whether a question, a clarification, a comment. We have a tech specialist being included in this budget for next year. Certainly, if the importance of tech has ever been underestimated in the past year, we've learned about the importance of tech. We have a residency. I'm not sure, a residency position. Someone can correct me on the appropriate way to say that. We have an equity liaison for a portion of time. Other things that that the board would like to discuss next. Mr. Sands, go ahead. Sorry, Ted, you're on mute.
One of the things that we heard in the public sessions and that we've certainly read about in all the emails that we've gotten, and by the way, it is very heartening to see that from this volume of emails that the parents are so involved in the educational process here in Guilford. It's very reassuring to know that. But one of the areas that we could see some discussion about was this issue of the trade-off between the increased art time in the elementary school and the reduced time for world language. And I was wondering if Dr. Freeman could talk a little bit about how that balance was determined.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Sands. Thank you. Again, this became a difficult decision, and it became a decision where we tried to look carefully at two values and find a way to continue to support both of those values. This board knows that over the last 3 to 4 years, we have had parents come out during the budget process asking for an increase in visual arts time at the elementary schools. And the very short exposure of visual arts has been discussed multiple times. The difficulty here, more than a financial difficulty, has been the limitations of time. We have a relatively short elementary school day. That day is already incredibly full for our young ones. And it was a matter of figuring out how to create more opportunities for art, visual art, within that limited elementary school day. At the same time, this board, over a number of years, a little bit more sporadically than the conversations around art, has been talking about the first grade through 12th grade world language program. And we've talked about the curriculum across those grades. I think some board members have at times heard commentary from parents about the transitions that we have built into those grades and how efficient or smooth those are. Additionally, there are a number of teaching shortage areas across the state of Connecticut, and world language is one of the most significant shortage areas, and it is the one, quite frankly, that has impacted us the most here in Guilford. And so as we looked at the value that we place on world language and exposing our students to a rich world language program, as we looked at the value that we place on the visual arts and how rich that opportunity was at the elementary level, and as we tried to work our way towards a win-win solution, the approach that we landed on after a lot of conversation was that if we move forward and increase the staffing from 2 at the elementary level to 4 art teachers at the elementary level, we would then have the capacity to increase art staffing at the art contact time at the elementary schools. If we likewise reduced the staffing in world language at the elementary level from 4 positions that we have historically struggled to fill to 2 positions, we would place ourselves in a better position to make sure that we were keeping consistency and we were reducing turnover, and our schools and our students had a person assigned to their school who stayed long-term over time and built relationships within that setting. Additionally, we then felt that while we would obviously be reducing the contact time in world language at the elementary level, and this one does include a reduction in contact time, there's no way that we would not reduce that contact time to some degree, that if we look carefully at the experience now from 1st grade through 12th grade, if we look more thoughtfully at those transitions, and if we revisit curricularly and look at that vertical articulation, that we could make up that contact time by being more efficient in the time that we left in the schedule. And so it is to some degree a pragmatic decision. It is a decision that is responsive to what we have been hearing for years from the community. And again, we believe that it's a decision where we can ultimately continue to place a value on both of those experiences. Now, again, I'm going to say that I've heard commentary that I don't disagree with. It would be great if we could have more exposure to art and not reduce the exposure to world language. In fact, a number of people have commented that we should be exposing our children, our youngest children, to more languages and for a greater portion of their school day. Right now, until we lengthen the elementary school day, or unless we look at virtual learning as an opportunity to leverage that, we're bound by the bookends of the school day, at least for now. I can tell this community that I would be happy in future years to continue to look at opportunities to lengthen the elementary school day and make it something that is more compatible with lots of other districts around the state of Connecticut. In fact, the districts against whom we benchmark ourselves, and then rebuild or regrow that opportunity in future years. But again, a schedule and a budget are both exercises in balancing those values. We again believe that while this is certainly a compromise at the elementary level, that if we look at the whole district and look for efficiencies across the whole district, what I know, for instance, is that this change will not limit students' opportunities to avail themselves of the languages that we provide at the high school. This will not prevent any child moving through our system from studying Arabic at the high school or for taking AP French 5 or IB language when they get to the high school. We're just looking at it differently. And we're looking to have, it's really our best effort to eat our cake and have it too.
Does it make sense for us to form some sort of a task force or committee to look at this question of lengthening the elementary day? I mean, this isn't something that's easy to do, and there are a lot of implications to it. But you know, I've had a number of parents talk to me about, you know, what is this constraint and what is the, you know, how could we change it? I know there are financial and other implications in this, but I wonder if we should take a look at this the way we took a look at changing starting times, for example.
Well, I was just going to say, Mr. Sands, we essentially sunsetted that task force, which what the start time task force did look at that. It is wrapped up in the 4 bus stops that we run to every morning. It is wrapped up into the bus schedule. And right, the length of the elementary school day is tied to the beginning of the high school day because we share buses. I do think that there are some opportunities to have that discussion moving forward. I think that there are some really creative solutions that don't appear to be at all connected to an elementary school day that we may need to begin discussing as a community again. I think some people watching this are going to think that I'm crazy. I would welcome the opportunity to have that conversation again more broadly. I think it's bigger than just the length of the elementary school day. I think it's a study about school times, grade level structures, facilities. I think there's a lot of pieces that get bundled into that. But I do think that there's an opportunity there to have some sort of conversation or study that takes place.
Thank you.
Other topics from the board? Go ahead, Dr. Hirsch.
Another thing that we got some community feedback on was the request for, I know that we're adding dollars to the swim team, particularly the women's swim team, but that there's been a request for an assistant coach. I don't have any idea what that would cost. I'm presuming as a part-time, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000 is my guess.
Good guess.
And so, you know, in a $16 million budget, that's not a big issue. While at the same time, we're trying to keep the budget down. So but are we on a trajectory which says, well, we were able to do that much this year, and maybe in the future we'll be able to do something more, but this is not the year to do both?
Yes, again, I think that's a good summary. We are adding $10,000 overall to the athletic budget. What this will do is that this will bring both swim teams up to the level that a head coach, all travel costs and all officiating costs are completely covered by the local budget. We've not been to that level before. Boys have always been part of a cooperative where we've shared those costs with other districts, and we know that girls, through parental contributions, have offset some of those costs. Many of our teams sit at exactly that position right now. Many teams that have been in our catalog of offerings for far longer than swimming sit exactly at that position now. I had all of these numbers sitting on my desk in my office, and I was unable to retrieve them today for this meeting. But we have multiple teams where we have one head coach who is supporting a team without the support of an assistant coach. I can have all of those numbers, and I can get all those numbers out to the board in the form of an email tomorrow. The boys and girls swim teams will not be the only teams that will be sitting around 20 participants supported by a head coach only without the support of an assistant coach. I believe there's approximately half a dozen or 7 teams that sit in that condition. Additionally, when you look at teams like boys and girls soccer and field hockey, and I believe one other that's escaping me, the teams that sit in the condition with head coach only include things like boys and girls tennis and golf and another offering. There's also, again, in boys and girls soccer and in field hockey, there's a situation where we have a head coach and 2 assistant coaches. But the reality is that those 3 coaches actually run 3 fairly significantly separate teams. There's a varsity team, a JV team, and a freshman team that are all essentially hosted. So there's actually approximately another half a dozen or 8 teams that are supported by an assistant coach without the additional support of another assistant or a head coach. Now, those are JV and freshmen. They're not varsity in nature, but there's a number of teams that sit in that condition. Every year, Mr. Jarvis brings forward a sort of a prioritized list of the teams where he feels there's the greatest need to add assistant coaches. And you're right, it's always balancing the need and the program versus the overall budget. I do believe that this is a step in the right direction for swimming. It's a relatively young sport compared to a number of other offerings in our catalog. We've grown it to this position. I think we will keep moving towards further supporting this sport, but there are other supports that are looking for that additional support as well. Yeah, I don't believe that this is the year to go all in and cover all associated costs, including both pool time and the assistant coaching positions. I'd also note that many people have mentioned the need for the assistant coach related to swim team because the activity takes place in a swimming pool. I do want to note for the board and the community that our agreements with the pools in which we swim, whenever there are fewer than 20 people in the pool, there's a lifeguard on duty. And if there are more than 25 people in the pool, there are 2 lifeguards on duty in addition to our coach. Now, they don't coach our athletes, but they are there as a safety precaution. And I did want to note that a couple of the communications that I saw had noted the risk involved of in the presence of the swimming pool.
Other questions, thoughts? Go ahead, Amy.
I just had a quick question about the residency edition. I think that, well, I speak for myself. I think I understand what it is, but am I remembering incorrectly? Did you mention that there was a possibility that there could be some money that comes to us by having that program?
Yeah, so yes, thank you for asking the question. I did mention that the residency that we are suggesting is Guilford Public Schools working in partnership essentially with districts across the state. I know that I saw that Enfield Public Schools is really moving strongly in this direction. There continues to be a shortage in the state of Connecticut of teachers of color across grade levels and across communities. There has been a concerted effort across the state to grow that pipeline, to encourage more young people of color to move into the teaching profession. A number of years ago, CREC, which is the Capital Area Educational Resource Center, got approval and launched a program in which they brought in aspiring teachers of color who worked full-time during the day and were paid for that position in the school system, attended courses at night, and completed and received their state certification. That program is now spreading across the state. Learn, who is the Shoreline Educational Resource Center with whom we work, is now bringing together a group of shoreline districts. Madison is included in this. A number of other shoreline districts are included, and we will be offering one of those positions. So we will have an individual who is an aspiring teacher of color. This is an elementary certification, so they would be placed at one of our elementary schools, most likely in a paraprofessional or daily substitute position. They will be part of a support network of the other individuals who are participating in this program across these other districts, and they will attend courses at night and will be part of this certification program. Currently, our cost associated with that is $35,000 to be part of this district-wide program, but the whole program is currently seeking grant funding. If that grant is secured, our cost will either be reduced or eliminated because the state is seeking to have this funded independently. So we would still provide the position and pay for the position, which is not an increase. We've got building substitutes and paraprofessionals, and those positions already exist in the budget. We will simply fill one of those vacancies with this individual. But that additional $35,000 expense to stand up the certification side of the program will likely, in fact, very likely be reduced, if not eliminated, once these grants are secured. I'm just not confident building something into the budget without the dollars and crossing my fingers, even though it's a likelihood. I'll also note that this is an initiative that we're really excited about. And in fact, tomorrow, Mr. Bowden and I are going to be meeting with a number of districts across the state, across the country, who are working on similar initiatives. And I'm really excited that as part of that opportunity, Jason and I will have the opportunity to sit with a panel of students. These are all aspiring students who are about to graduate from HBCUs from across the country. We're going to have the opportunity to talk with them about what it would take for us in Guilford to attract students like them who want to begin their teaching career, and how could we better and more effectively be recruiting teachers of color so that we could diversify our teaching force here in the district. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a number of weeks. These are people who are about to land their certification in the next few months, will be out in the job market looking for positions just like these and giving us feedback on what we've been doing as a district and how we could better attract and then maintain teachers just like them in our school system.
Dr. Freeman, a follow-up question, which is not necessarily about the budget next year, so I'll make it very short. But so the individual then for this residency program, if he or she is with us next year, what happens at the end of that year, whether it's here or in Madison or all the schools and participate? How are those people supported? Is there a commitment to keeping them in district? Is it, I imagine there's something about how the relationship goes, just like there would be with any teacher. But yep. I'm curious about what the support is for this group of folks to participate in this program in the follow-up.
They remain part of that support network that I mentioned. We have the opportunity to hire that person into Guilford, and if we should choose to hire that individual into Guilford, they're committed to us for 3 years of service, right? They, in return for the support and the tuition that goes with the residency program, should we choose to hire that person, then they're committed to us for at least 3 years. Our hope is that we're creating the kind of environment where we can hold on to those individuals.
Right.
The reason for the Shoreline Collaborative is that when you are a district of Guilford size, we can't guarantee that we will have a vacancy when necessary. So the multiple districts that are coming together then have the opportunity to offer those positions to other participants in the network. So if for instance, a neighboring shoreline community like Madison didn't have a vacancy and we were interested in 2 of the candidates from the program, we could offer positions to 2 rather than the 1. And if we didn't have an opportunity to hire on the local person who works with us next year, then they'd have the opportunity of being hired into one of those additional shoreline districts that are participating. There's real conversation at the state to growing this program out even more fully and using the RESCs, those regional educational support centers, as the nexus for this work moving forward.
Terrific. Mr. Sands, do you have a question?
Yes. Well, I'm a little confused about one thing, Dr. Freeman. This person who's going to be working with us, is while they're in this status that you've indicated, are they going to be in effect replacing a building substitute or replacing a para?
Filling a vacancy in one of those two areas, but not replacing. No one will be laid off to make room for this individual. We have turnover and vacancies in those two areas every year that we scramble to fill. So we're confident that we will have a vacancy. We don't need to add a new position. They'll fill a vacancy within one of those two areas.
Then why do we have 35,000 in the budget for that? Because if the person is taking it will be doing productive work for us that is reducing our need to go out and replace somebody else to come into the district.
So the salary goes to the individual who will be filling the position and doing the work during the school year. The $35 is our contribution to the program that covers the administrative costs of the program, the instructional costs, the tuition.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Essentially, it's covered. This is an opportunity for somebody to receive certification with tuition assistance. Our $35,000 covers that tuition or the scholarship that will be provided to the individual.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you.
I appreciate the question.
So I'm just going to take the opportunity now just to mention that what the next steps are, and then give board members an opportunity to ask any questions related to other things. So the next step is that we will be next Monday making some budget decisions and making listening to the recommendations, taking the recommendations, and then making decisions about those recommendations. Each of us has this budget book that we have gone through. Certainly, we've heard from the public about particular things that have caught their attention. There may be things among board members that we have questions about that are not on what I might call kind of the hot topics that we've heard right over the last couple of weeks. So in preparation for that meeting, where, as I think all of us recall, we are going to sit there with a little spreadsheet and say, if we take out 20,000 from here, and if we need to put 10,000 in there, et cetera, where do we land? What is our goal, et cetera. So again, are there, certainly on any topic we discussed, but any other things that board members have questions about as they've looked at their budget books or heard people talking that they want to ask about? Go ahead, Kristen, Ms. Peck, go ahead.
Hi there. Dr. Freeman, I think it's really exciting that we're talking about adding a family equity liaison. And I would just love it if you could tell me a little bit more about what that person will actually do. I understand that it's going to be an administrative type role rather than a social worker type role. Is that correct? I understand that we're expecting to have that person for about 10 hours a week. And I'm just curious to see how you envision those 10 hours a week filled. What will their activities consist of?
Thank you, Mrs. Peck. I appreciate that question. We did hear a number of positive comments over these last few weeks around that position as well. I'm excited about that position as well. So the idea here is that we would be looking for somebody who is knowledgeable about the school system. So it could be somebody who has experience as a school counselor or a social worker, or it could likely be somebody who has experience as a school administrator. We also want it to be somebody who will be approachable and somebody who could be empathetic to the concerns that might be raised by students or families of students who identify as members of marginalized communities. And so the vision for this is that it would be a position that we're figuring this out. I consider this a pilot year as we experiment with this position. But to begin with, we're assuming that it's about 10 hours a week. The individual would begin by introducing themselves to the community, making themselves available to the community, and explaining that the position is there to be a consult and a liaison to these families, so that any member of the community who felt like their child was being not served appropriately or treated unfairly because of that child's identification as a member of a marginalized group. So whether that's because of religious affiliation or gender identity or race or ethnicity, if you felt that your child's needs weren't being met, or that you didn't understand how your child was being supported in some way, you would be able to reach out to this family liaison. The liaison would be available both through voicemail and through email that the district would provide. The individual would then be able to listen to the parent, to listen to the family, to advise or consult the family. Oftentimes there's a miscommunication because sometimes families aren't always as familiar with the ways school systems work, or don't always feel enfranchised within the school system to advocate for themselves. So the first approach would be somebody who could listen and advise the individual. The liaison would also be available to function just as that, as a liaison between the family and then the administration, whether that be building level administration or district level administration. This individual will not be reaching out directly to teachers on behalf of the families or the students, but working through the administration and possibly even through the guidance office to then be a liaison, not just to advise the family, but to also talk to the schools and make sure that in the schools we are hearing the concerns that are being raised. And ultimately, if necessary, through advice and through liaison, to advocating for that family if necessary, to really being somebody who knows how to speak strongly and forcefully to school district administration if we feel that the needs of a child aren't being met successfully. Importantly, that person is also going to be meeting with me regularly, helping me to be aware not of individual concerns, because it's not about the individual concerns, but bringing to our attention patterns or gaps that this individual is identifying through that service. So that we can then systemically be able to respond to those things, as well as individually support families and students who feel that they need that level of support. And again, I want to point out that this suggestion came to us through conversations that I had had with some parents in the community and some parents who had served in the military, and noted that in bases all across the world, members of the US military have exactly this kind of support that they can go to if they feel that they're not being understood or that their needs aren't being met. And so we're excited about rolling it out. I don't know at the end of this year if we will say that that was a good first step, but we need to grow this support and grow this position, or if we may come back and say that it continues to be an important piece to maintain, but 10 hours a week is more than we need, and we'll make an adjustment in either direction.
Wonderful. I'm noticing a couple of our participants in dark spaces. I know we've lost at least one of our board members has just lost power. So
yeah,
so
and my lights have flickered about 3 times. I'm concerned as well.
We're starting to see some issues here, and certainly we'll understand if people have to drop off. Are there board members who have, and certainly there of course is an opportunity over the next week to contact Dr. Freeman, email him, ask questions of the business office if things come up. But I want to give any board member an opportunity. Any questions, other kind of questions? Some of the things that you think you may be considering as you look at the book and at the budget book and make some determinations. Dr. Freeman, sorry, I am going to ask one more question. I know that you've talked about a reduction in elementary school teachers, and we've talked about the fact that we may see an increase in what we might have as a typical kindergarten census next year due to the fact that we think that there were a number of people who may have held their children back this year. And we think that because I at least got 1 or 2 emails asking about whether that was permissible in the state of Connecticut, and secondly, because we did have a pretty small kindergarten this year. Could you just explain to me, so is that really is it a net of one decrease? I'm just to kind of clarify how that works in terms of the budget book.
Yep, thank you. No, it is currently a net decrease of 2.
Okay.
So this year we budgeted for 12 kindergartens, but only filled 11. So that means that we will likely continue to have 11 sections that will now march through. So those 11 kindergarten sections this year will become 11 first grade sections next year. That 12th kindergarten section this year was never filled, and rather than carrying it forward next year unfilled, we're reducing it from the budget. We did budget for 12 kindergartens next year, so we do expect to bounce back up to a full 12 kindergartens next year. Should there be a need to add a 13th kindergarten, we would do that. That is currently unbudgeted, but we have done that in past years, and we've always found ways. Again, the salary line is the single largest line. We will talk about retirement savings next year, but if there are more retirements than retirement savings that we build into the budget, that's often a way that we can then fund that additional position. Additionally, there's a second position where, again, looking at that kindergarten size or that class size average of 18, we currently have a grade in the district that has 4 sections, and the enrollment is sitting around 14 for those 4 sections. We can reduce that to 3 sections next year and still be right around that 18 or 19 class size that we target district wide. So those are 2 changes. And again, we've made changes of this nature at the elementary level almost every year now for the last several years. And again, right, when we notice that we miss the mark, and when we see class sizes at the elementary level begin to creep up to where they're too large, we will add an additional section if necessary, as we saw at LEAT just a few years ago, where we added that additional section at a grade level. So those are real anticipated reductions at this time.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, I'm gonna throw it out for any more additional questions, and then I'm gonna suggest, seeing that we see some people who are losing power or lights flickering, I don't want to carry on a conversation where people start having to drop off and miss the conversation. Any last questions for this evening from board members? Any last comments from Dr. Freeman or any of the district leadership team?
I want to thank all the district leaders for being here today. This has obviously been an unusual weekend, an unusual couple of days in the middle of an unusual month, in the middle of an unusual year. Even those of you who didn't have an opportunity to speak tonight, I really do appreciate you being here and being available for the conversation. And I really want to thank the board members for your thoughtful questions and observations tonight. Again, I've really enjoyed these past couple of weeks. I know it's a difficult conversation. I don't say that I enjoyed it because it's a tough decision to make. I enjoyed it because of the quality of the conversation, first from the community last week, and again tonight from all of you. And I just really appreciate it. It speaks to our commitment to our enterprise and our kids in this community. It's why I enjoy being part of the Guilford community, even when we're making difficult decisions in difficult times. And I want to thank all of you for that.
I would like to echo that. I have to say, as certainly as a board member, the input that each of you provides over the course of a year, and all kinds of decisions we have to make and things we have to think about, is so greatly appreciated, as is just the work that you do in this district, and the amazing ways that you support our students and the staff. So thank you so very much. So I am going to again remind the public that this is then a budget vote that will take place next Monday. I will invite board members who may have questions that come up to reach out to Dr. Freeman or myself, and we can, I think probably we've done this in the past, we can make sure that everyone hears the questions, everyone, if there are duplications, Dr. Freeman or Linda are not kind of running around trying to answer them multiple times. But just make sure that everyone gets questions answered so we can come next week feeling well informed, though of course we can ask any then as well. Thank you again, everyone. I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. A second? Mrs. Peck, you raised your hand. Is that a second? Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So everyone, please, hopefully you will stay safe tonight, have power, appreciate your participation, and wish you a nice rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone.